Okay, so I promised a lot of things this past week, and one of them was about EndNote and how I use it to do research. And I'm going to start with a really short video that recaps how I use Google, and then it will continue into the EndNote one, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But just to start, I wanted to emphasize, first of all, that Google is your friend. So I start most of my research in Google Scholar, which you can see here, scholar.google.com. And I mentioned that Google Scholar actually gets better at remembering you the more that you go and do searches. So just remember that your results are a little bit biased to you. So if you search the same thing as your friend or colleague who's doing similar research, but they usually work on, let's say, engineering, their results may turn up a different prioritized set of results. And my student learned this the hard way. So two things that I wanted to recap in case you missed it in the lecture is that, one, Google Scholar has this little, I don't know what this is called. Oh, I think it's called a hamburger menu. And here you can go to settings. And in settings, you can link your library account. So you can select these two. If you're on the ODU network, and that means like you're in the library on our Wi-Fi or you're using an actual ODU computer, these will generally connect automatically, and it'll let you access the library files directly. So you'll already be signed in. I'm not signed in. I was when I gave the original presentation. And so I'm going to actually show you why that matters. And it's easier when I'm not on the network, because you're probably not when you're at home. Okay, so that was step one. I can set the settings that way. And the other thing that I mentioned about Google was that you can go to metrics and you can sort these categories so that you can get a sense of different journals that you can follow in your field. And in my case, that's migration. And I don't necessarily agree with all, I don't even know what this is. And it gets a high ranking. We didn't talk about how it does these rankings. All rankings are different, and I think you can sort by these different rankings. It even tells you how this is done. But I do actually read quite a few of these, and I mentioned that, I'm going to try this one because I don't actually know this one. That you can look for these journals and sign up for their table of contents. So that's not what that should have turned up. Oh, here it is. It's a Wiley Online Library Journal. And you can see here it does your latest issues. But here, and some of the journals make it easier to find than others, here's where you can get the content alerts. And this is if you find journals that you repetitively reference in class that you think are really interesting, or if you're in a particular subfield like mine and there are only a certain number of journals that cover that for the most part, I would suggest that you sign up for these content alerts. You can set up a new user account and you can check a bunch of different journals, and what it does is it sends you a table of contents to your email which resembles simply the latest issue of the journal. So the email content will look a lot like this. Sometimes it even has a little bit of an abstract here so you can read it, and it's a really good way to skim and see what people are doing in the field right now, as opposed to some of the more classic literature that you're probably looking at. And so that's just one way to find these different sources. Now, I didn't get to talk about this in class, but I wanted to talk about it in case you're really nerdy like me. You can go to the ODU Libraries website, and one of the things that you can search that I think is super fun is here in the databases. It's just below the search bar, but it's also in this research, I don't know what this is, bin here. If you go to the databases, there's a Web of Science. I'm going here to W, clicking W. You can scroll down here to Web of Science. Now this only works if you're logged in. I'm not on the network now, so that makes it a little bit easier to demonstrate this, but basically you just have to sign in. And I'm going to look for a particular topic, So let's say I'm looking for refugees and Lesbos. So you can obviously narrow that search down. You saw that I did nothing, but this returns 31 results. Okay, that's not a good example. And it'll actually let you create an alert for this type of topic. So if you're studying something in the long term, like a dissertation or a thesis, this is a really good way to sort of weed this down. And Web of Science is a particular database. There are lots of databases, all are slightly different, and they have lots of overlap between them. But Web of Science is vetted in a particular way. And so one of the things you can do is just, read these abstracts without having to go to each of the separate journal pages. These are from Environment and Planning, and this one's from Journal of Evidence-Based Social Work. And you can select these different ones, and you can actually export them to EndNote. And so you can just do the 3 that you've done. You can collect them in a bin on this page, and it basically puts them into a file format that can go into EndNote. So in a Mac, this is a little bit different. On a Windows machine, I can actually just click the Downloads folder and it opens them up. And you can see here that the 3 things I just found in Web of Science are now here in my imported references. All I had to do was click on it. In a Mac, you often have to either go to your file and actually import a file, and then you have to select a type. It can be a little complicated, or you can sometimes drag and drop. It just depends on how your Mac is set up. So you always want to check these when they go into EndNote, because you're at the mercy of the person who formatted the actual file on the other end. So always check that the journal name is what you think it is. Sometimes these names get messed up. Sometimes they're written first name, last name instead of last name, comma, first name. And sometimes this information isn't filled in even though it is available. So you want to check that. In this case, I asked Web of Science to export the abstracts, and it has this Web of Science link, which only works if you're logged in. So this is how you get sort of a bulk download from something like Web of Science, where, if you recall, I basically just found some articles. I didn't look very hard. I found some articles and just selected them, and then used this export to EndNote desktop. Well, it was just export before, but it remembers me. And so you can export to these different formats, including EndNote Online if, say, you're using someone else's computer and you're using EndNote Web. So the other thing I wanted to point out in Web of Science that I think is really interesting, and I'm going to do a different search because I want the results to be bigger, so I'm just going to do refugees. And the thing that I think is really interesting about Web of Science versus others is that they have these analyzed results built in. And analyzed results basically lets you drill down on certain topics. So if your topic is really big and you simply don't know where to start or how to narrow it down, and you find that a lot of the studies are maybe in a different field than you meant for them to be, this tree map, and you can see it has different visualizations. You can see how many tend to fall in which broad discipline. And you can change this. This is based on the Web of Science categories, but you can do it based on years. So you can see how the publications about refugees have increased over time in the Web of Science database. You can do them by these different categories here, and so we could even get down to, say, and these are done by Web of Science, so take it with a grain of salt, but you can see vaguely where some of these funding for the research, but importantly, and this is not the end-all be-all, but you can also find some of the authors and editors who tend to be the most well-published in their particular area, which can help you narrow down some people to follow. And I'm just going to go with the categories. But what it allows you to do, and let's say we're here in political science or social science interdisciplinary. Oh, here, look, international relations. You can actually just view the records that are available in that field. So this is just what Web of Science has determined to be relevant in the field of international relations in my broad topic area. I can narrow it by years. I can look at these particular categories. So all of these are filtering features that would let me see which ones are the most relevant in the area that I'm looking at. I find this really helpful when I'm looking in an area that I just have never done before. And the other thing is that if I go back, I can actually, oops, sorry. I can actually download this. And so sometimes you're making an argument as a JPEG, right? Sometimes you're making an argument that the field really isn't well studied, or it's not well studied in our area, and this can be a visual that helps you make that argument. You can see these different breakdowns. It has different types of citation analysis, so it's something that can help you when you're working in an area, say, that is understudied or that you just haven't done before. It kind of helps you visually explore if that's your thing. So I'm going to get back to Google Scholar and do a similar search. So I'm going to search for refugees in Lesbos, and of course this turns up a much different set of results, but some of these articles are really interesting, and you can save them, of course, to your library, but you can also download the citation. So this little, in case you missed that, this little quote mark here is what it would look like in each of these citation formats, but you can actually download it straight to EndNote file format. And I tend to store, I'm not doing that in this case because these I'm just going to toss later, but I usually create a folder somewhere and I store the EndNote files there because they can get a bit messy. And again, because I'm on a Windows machine, I can just click this and it'll open it in EndNote and put it in this format for me. And again, I can check it. I find that the ones that come out of Google Scholar tend to be the worst formatted, but in this case, it looks like it's pretty good. And so that directly gets some of these in, and I'm going to talk about how I use EndNote in my next short video. But when you click on these, so there's nothing over here that says that I can check for full text. On campus, it's a lot easier, but I have this thing called Copernio set up, and it is linked to my ODU account. And so it basically does the work for me for searching for these articles inside of our ODU database. So if I click View PDF, it actually looks to see if it can find it itself, and then it's like, okay, here's your PDF version of this article. Whether or not this website here says that I can, you can see here, it's telling me to get access because I don't just automatically have access. You know, if I were logging in from a campus network, this probably isn't the case. I could probably just read it right away, but right now I can only see these notes. This Copernio add-on that I have, it's, you can see it right there, it's Copernio. It is set up with my Midas account so that I can actually just look for this, and you'll note here it has an export to EndNote feature. The thing about Copernio is that it exports not just the citation, but also the PDF for me, if you're into that. And if that's not the case, and usually the article website has its own, so there's a download citation. These are a little hard to find on different websites. They put them in all different places, but something like download citations, or it'll say cite this or reference this, and you can choose whether or not you want to download the citation and abstracts. Why you would download citations and references is because sometimes these references form the next string as you sort of pull that thread to find more and more stuff on your particular topic area. So that's how I get from EndNote from Google Scholar to EndNote. The other thing is sometimes if you're off campus and this get access thing isn't working, and before I installed this Copernio thing, this is annoying because I need this article and I can't necessarily get access. So one of the things you can do is actually just copy and paste this into the ODU Libraries website. And so I can put this, I want to look for just articles here, and it's helpful if you put this in quotes, because I don't want articles that have the similar words, I just want it to be that article. And the ODU library will try to find that article. It did not. Thanks, ODU. And so what I'd have to do in this case is, if I didn't have the Copernio thing installed, I'm looking for this particular journal. So I would search for the Journal of Applied Security Research through ODU. And you see here there's an A through Z journal search. I can just search this. So research. So I think what this means, let me try the full name, Journal of Applied Security Research, is that we don't actually have access to this journal. So one of the problems, and Copernio is getting this some other way, so ODU does have the, oh no, it's using an open access version. Copernio usually will find things that are inside of ODU for me, but in this case, we don't have access to this, and that's not exactly a problem. If you haven't used this before, the ODU interlibrary loan is actually really, really good. And here under services on the main library website, there's an interlibrary loan link. If you have it set up, and this happens when I'm on the network, sometimes it'll ask you somewhere on this page if you want to look it up on your interlibrary loan, but you can go to this interlibrary loan website and just log into it. It's a separate portal within our library website. And oh, I changed their interface. But basically you can submit a request for any of these things, and I could submit the request for this article, and I'll just type in these fields, and you usually say which date, like after which you don't want it. So if it's for a term paper, obviously you need it before the deadline. And when you submit the request, I've found that most of the time, unless it's a really obscure article, that the ODU librarians can get back to you with a copy of the article that you can download within a few days. Books take a little bit longer because you get the physical book through the interlibrary loan, but the articles are usually pretty quick, and that includes chapters as well. I think they get librarians in other universities to scan chapters and share them that way. I'm not exactly sure. So that's basically how I get around in Google Scholar, and my next video is going to show you how I use EndNote to do research.